Eric Smith here with the Oroville Area Chamber of Commerce, and this is Museum Weekend. And we're at a very special place here at the Chinese Temple in Oroville, California. And I have a very special docent. In fact, she is in charge of all the docents.
I'm here, yes.
Yes, Michelle Kahn, and she's going to give us a tour of this amazing facility.
And welcome here to the Chinese Temple. It's actually a complex. We have like 9 different rooms that you can view and tour, but we're only going to do a few of them today, so there will be something left for you to come and look for later. Shall we start?
All right, come on aboard with this virtual tour.
When we enter the temple, we enter through the gift shop, and then we're going to go into what's the main temple, the original temple for this complex.
Now, Michelle, just real quick, I understand that this is the actual operating temple.
Yes, it is. The temples are used by those who worship. The first temple we have here is the Temple of Many Gods, or Many Deities, and it was built first, and that's why we're going to start there.
All right.
But come along. It's fun in this room. And notice the pretty gifts. So here we are in the main temple, and this temple was built in 1863. There were other temples that they built a little bit earlier, but this was built out of the brick so it would last because others had been destroyed by fire. It was built for the Chinese to worship many gods because the Chinese that came to live in this area were they worshipped in many forms, but they only could really afford to build one temple at the time. So this is what this room is. There's some really fun things about this room to know and understand what the Chinese were doing here. If we go over here, they would enter through here, and when they came in, they would light incense, wash their hands, ring the gong. You can see the gong over here 3 times to wake up the gods. And if you'll notice, down here, you have to step up. And the reason for that is to keep the evil spirits away, because the evil spirits didn't have knees. They couldn't lift their legs up to go over that. So that was a protection for this worship area. And if a person would be coming here and wanting to worship or ask a favor of the gods, one of the things they would do is there would be an attendant here. And that attendant they wanted their fortune told, would take this little thing here. When one of these came out, it has some characters on here, and it would match one of the fortunes over here. And then they would have their fortune told by that. And if it was a good fortune, then they would take it, and they would take it out to the urn in front, and they would burn it so the smoke could go up to the gods, and they could get their request. Now, I've never heard what happened if it was a bad fortune. I'm guessing they didn't, they did something else with it, but I don't know what. When you come into the temple, you'll notice that this first altar, there's 5 items on it. 5 is a good number in Chinese culture. And you'll notice that they usually do things in those numbers. They don't I know that 4 is not a good number. So when they would worship, they would come over across here to this one, and they would put incense in here and burn incense to the gods. And then they would ask their gods for whatever it was they want. Maybe it was their health for their son, or a shipment that came from China would arrive properly, or things like that. Whatever they were wishing for. Maybe a good deal when they were making some sort of buying a business or something. And they would pray to their gods and leave gifts. You'll notice on the altar these gifts that have been left by people. And these are left by people who have come here because it currently is a place of worship. Well, if you'll notice that on the walls are prayer boards. What I consider calling them is they're like thank you cards. When they came here and they asked the gods for whatever they needed and what they wanted, if it came true, they would bring these boards and hang them here in the temple.
Very, very colorful.
Beautiful, aren't they?
It is.
Beautiful. And so this particular, I mean, it's a temple for many gods, but it was, you think of Confucianism, Buddha, and Taoism mostly is what was worshipped in here. And so this is the main temple, and it's the oldest part of the building. I will say that, and there were fires here even after this was built. And then there was flooding. So in 1907, there was a big major flood. I guess the water was like 5 feet high in all the buildings. So many of the Chinese left after that because their economic opportunities had changed. And so they left the area. But prior to that, Oroville had one of the largest numbers of Chinese in the state of California.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
That's an amazing fact, yeah.
Yeah. So it's an important view. And then we're going to go out this way. We're going to wander out here. We're going to go back through the gift shop, and we're going to go out to the courtyard.
All right, to the courtyard.
So in the courtyard, this courtyard was built in the 1960s. The bricks, if you'll notice the bricks, the pattern that it is, this is the beneficial cloud pattern that benefits grain. And so that's why the pattern is laid out here. The plants that are here are all Chinese cultured. They all come from China.
This is an amazing pine tree.
Yeah, this is it's called the lace bark pine.
Lace bark?
And other things, puzzle bark, and there's a couple other names that it's called. But I think it's really a fascinating tree.
It is.
If you
It's
look
very
at the
different.
bark, look at the bark, and you'll see it peels away and leaves those little patterns on it. We also have the koi pond, which we're just replacing the koi now, but it's a beautiful little pond near the courtyard. Got too much light on it, baby? A little bright, huh?
Yeah.
But I love the sound of the water. And the azaleas will all soon be blooming. This is beautiful when the azaleas are blooming and all the plants are blooming.
Oh, yeah, and I see also these trees here starting to bloom as well.
Yeah, no problem. It is. It's beautiful. A little bit more warm. We're going to enter the Tapestry Room now.
Okay, the Tapestry Room.
And I love the Tapestry Room. There's a couple things. We'll go on in here. When you enter here, you'll notice the door gods. Now they're there again to protect whoever enters and to protect against evil spirits, evil. So they're giving us protection when we walk through here, keeping us safe. Now these tapestries were, when the flood came in 1907 and so much was damaged, these were saved by the Chan family. And they took and they stored them and kept them until the city took over this in about 1937 when the city started restoring the building.
Mm-hmm.
But that they were saved, otherwise they would have been lost to posterity.
Yeah, wow.
Right. So when you come along here, here's an interesting case. This is Chinese, different forms of Chinese coins or money. And if you'll note the tapestries, as you look, there's little mirrors on those. Now those mirrors along these tapestries are, again, another safety against the evil spirits, because they felt that an evil spirit was so ugly, if it saw itself reflected, it would run away. So it's another protection for this, for the people who have these. And then the stitches on here, they had something were stitched so fine, it was called the forbidden stitch. The emperors forbade it because it took so much time and they were so tiny that it would hurt the eyes of people. Well, they still did it, but it was called the forbidden stitch.
Yeah, that's amazing artwork. And this is all done by hand.
All done by hand.
Wow.
And you'll notice that the different patterns are, everything is symbolic in the Chinese culture. Mm-hmm. All these mean something. Mm-hmm. I'm not familiar with a lot of those. So we have some docents that are.
Right.
And if you come, maybe you'll get a chance to be with them, and they'll give you a little bit more information on some of this stuff.
Yeah, so Michelle, since you're talking about docents, and we just keep wanting to reiterate this, that, we need more docents.
Oh,
So if you have a fascination or love for history, and of course, Oroville has such a rich culture and history, contact the city. We're going to make sure that phone number, they can give that a call and, join the club, because we need more docents.
We need more docents, and you have your choice of 5 museums that you could go. If you prefer something other than the temple, then you can go to Victorian Home, you can go to the Pioneer Nature Center, or the Tool. There's a lot to see. And
so if you have a love in any one of those niches.
Yeah, if you want your hands on, go to the boat.
There you go.
For sure. Then, as you can see, that we have a whole lot of tapestries here, and they're all very, very beautiful. Over here, which is interesting, and it's another one of my favorite things, just simply because these are the shadow puppets, and they were also brought here. You'll notice that they tell stories. They would be either telling what the emperor wanted them to know, or they would be telling mythology stories about morality type stories of how you should act. And so they're either telling what was happening, or they're telling you how you should act. What I find interesting in these, they're made out of donkey skin. They're tanned donkey skin to begin with. And then over here, you'll see a whole bunch of heads. And so what they could do is they could take the body and change the heads and show that people were aging, or they had changed from bad to good or good to bad, depending on what the storyline was. And so this is all those, and if you look closely, I think you can check out and see, like I'd say this guy wasn't such a good guy.
Yeah, he had better days.
He had better days. And then maybe these warriors were probably, or, the people were better, nicer people in the storyline. But I think that's fun. And then we have, just different scenes that show what life was like. And because, again, this is a culture that didn't have, most people didn't read. And they wanted to tell their stories. They tell their stories verbally, oral
tradition. Yeah.
Oral tradition. And we have this one. They say that this oxblood face was built as prior to 1820.
Wow.
So it's another artifact here that has some age to it.
Yeah, definitely. Now that piece there in the middle, that very large wooden, it looks like it's a carved wood.
I think it's teak.
Let's see. That's an amazing piece.
It's a copy of a Ming period bronze, it says. And in this,
okay, bronze. Oh my goodness, it is.
But what's interesting about this is the Chan family I talked about. Phil Chan was someone who I went to school with, and she was part of the Chan family. She used to crawl on and walk, play with that.
Wow.
It was in their home. So,
beautiful piece.
That was when she was a young girl, of course. Now we're going to go on into the exhibit hall, display hall. And as we walk through here, you'll notice some of the beautiful carvings on the chairs, and the tables.
Well, again, all the intricacy, all hand carved.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And of course, so many of the symbols, the dragon is a good luck symbol. Mm-hmm. I mean, so many of the symbols are there in all this. And in this room, we have various things we display. We have musical instruments. And they were talking about this butterfly harp. It's kind of a rare form. Cinnabar, this is what they do a lot of carving from. You'll notice the cinnabar. Mm-hmm. It's a rock that they carve from. Mm-hmm. A lot of that was very popular type of doing their work. Mm-hmm. The thing that interests, whenever we bring the students here, we have a lot of school tours. And the thing that, of course, boys like is his sword.
Uh-huh. You have to be pretty strong to lift that.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it was carried in praise, and it was also used just to east of us. There's another building that was the theater, and this was actually used in the theater too. So, wow. But it was one of their props for the theater. But it's kind of interesting what catches their eye.
I noticed in parentheses it says heavy.
It's pretty heavy. We open it up and see if we can lift it, right? So you'll see the different objects that were related to the Chinese, and I know all the emblems that are the motifs that are on them are.
Just the detail is so amazing. You could just spend a lot of time just, looking at all that intricacy of a lot of this pottery. It's fascinating.
It's just beautiful. And then the Mahjong set, and it's still popular. It's a popular game today. Probably a lot of people now play it on their computer, Mahjong. But yeah, it's a very popular tile game. And this particular, we point out this gentleman when we're talking about to the kids, because if you'll notice, this is a child set of little shoes. But over there, those are women's shoes, when Chinese had their feet bound. And we tell the story, just so it used to be that having a woman with her very small feet indicated that they couldn't walk hardly. So they had to be carried by servants. So it was a prestige thing. It was, the idea is if you had your wife and she couldn't walk and she had to be taken care of by servants, that indicated your wealth and where you were. So it wouldn't have been peasant women that had this. It would have been more the upper class that it was done for.
So it doesn't sound like being upper class was always the best, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, and it was, if you ever read on it, it was a very painful process, but it was common in that particular culture for that particular class. And then as we move along here, we see the writing desk and the different robes, and we have more robes in the next room. Again, looking at the work, the handwork, all the embroidery, the beauty of the things. Here's some dolls here. And the little shoes that have the little cat faces on them, the little cat faces are good luck. So another good luck item.
And up there it says puppets as well. So puppets must have been pretty popular.
Well, they were again telling the story. Now, these are paper mache. Generally, they're either the 9 immortals or other characters either telling, the history again, or telling what the stories they wanted to give to the people about it, what the emperor, morality stories, the same thing. But they were once used down here at the theater. Over down there.
A little story. I was a puppeteer at one time. Yeah. They're a lot of fun. It's a great to tell stories, especially with kids.
Yeah, kids. And I'm thinking, these puppets. Anyway, they're very, very, but again, intricate. But you can kind of tell again who's the good guy and who's the bad guy most of the time.
Now, this is another amazing piece here. Again, just the detail, this particular artifact.
Yeah. And then these came recently. This is a set of 5, and they call it, I can't remember, graniture. It's a set of 5 items. And they're from like 1760 or something like that, and they were donated a couple of years ago. What's amazing is not only that they're all in good shape,
yes,
but they also have the book.
Isn't that something? So
which explains how they are.
Catalog it, and
So we found that.
Story.
So we found that a very nice donation to the temple. We're going to go back around this way. Oh no, we need to go back. I'm sorry. She said the lights were. Oh, they're on that way. Okay, we're going to go back in here. This is the costume room. And in here, some of the earlier docents had collected these items because their families had lived in China as missionaries. And so they had Chinese clothing, and then they had clothing that represented the American culture. And so they mixed them so you could see the difference between the styles of Eastern and Western wear.
Interesting.
So we'll show this one this is the bride, Chinese bride. And if you'll notice, this would be a disc on her chest that would have been shiny, and it was again another thing reflecting so that the evil spirits, would keep away during the wedding ceremony. So these are the Chinese wedding gowns, and then we have the Victorian wedding gown.
Yeah, that doesn't look Chinese.
No, that's the mix. That's what's
the mix.
showing
There
you.
it is. Yes.
And you'll also see over here. There's some more. This is more of the Western wear brides.
What a fascinating collection.
And then here, you just, again, the same thing. Common clothing for the Chinese and what our Western wear was. The lotus design on this one here is just beautiful, isn't it? All that stitchery.
That's amazing. Again, probably handmade.
So, and then just the differences, and that's what I think on the other side we have some children's wear, but you can see if you walk down the difference in what would be common wear. Actually, doesn't the Chinese wear look much more comfortable? But
I see you're in the tradition.
yeah,
Yeah.
we wear our robes when we give tours. We do private, and they're Chinese robes. They're not kimonos. Kimonos Japanese.
Uh-huh.
And then we're going to go over here because there's some kids' clothing here. Along with this, I think I'm going to turn her head. See, kids would be wearing very similar type of clothing than the little girls would be wearing on the dresses. So, little difference in the costuming. But that's what it is. It's just to show the difference in culture. And over the years.
And of course, if you're in, you can take the time and read all the placards and get all the details.
Yeah, get all the details on what this is. Yeah, have good information on all those little placards. And they always like to carve things too. If you want to check this guy out, this wood piece.
That is
When
fascinating.
we clean it, they took a piece. I'm sure what it was a burl of some sort, and they carved it because of the shape into what represented a critter it was.
Yeah,
I think it's a phoenix. I'm pretty sure it is.
yeah, that's really something.
And we all have our favorite things, so
Yeah.
we're going to move on. I think in this room I like the children's clothes. And then this room, I pick favorites. I think it's fascinating about the binding of the feet as a story. And if you've ever read any books on Chinese culture, they describe the process. And now we're going to go back to the tapestry. How are you doing time on? Back to the courtyard.
So of course there's parts of the temple here that we're not going to be able to cover in this virtual tour, and that means you're going to have to come and do a live tour when we open.
Can you get a shot of the pomelos? I always want to call them pomelos, and I think they're pomelos, but they're huge. They look like they're like a big grapefruit. That's another traditional.
That looks like something from Jurassic Park.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Now we can go upstairs and view the moon room, or we can go through directly to the one we can walk through. Shall we go there?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. This is the Fong Li building. Oh, this is a
Yeah.
Now, as we talked about the Chan family, this is the Fong Li building, and he was a herbalist, and he had this store in Oroville. And it was an apothecary store. So he also did gold. Took in gold dust and gave money for it. So this is actually the fixtures from that store.
Wow.
And the fascinating thing about this, besides the fact that the furniture is that old, is the cabinet back here is the herbs, has all sorts of Chinese herbs in it, and they're actually still in there.
Wow.
And so we haven't identified all these herbs yet, but they're here. They're little Chinese packages.
That's amazing.
And I won't know if we're going to get one out very slowly. So that's one of our tasks, is to find out what all these things are.
So that's all a process that comes back and goes. So there's so much work left to be done.
There is.
So if you love this kind of stuff, come and join the team.
Join the team.
Yeah, wow.
And this is also, we talked about the worship. This is actually an altar that people worship at for their ancestors. You'll notice that there's incense there, and it is an active area for worship. You have the gold scales over here because, again, he was buying gold and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he would purchase gold. This, I don't know if you can see very well, but it was talking about a feast that was put on by some of the local Chinese. I don't know if you can read that or not. They gave but it's a newspaper article. And then at Fong Room, but it's Chung Hong Yu. And this is when he died. He was an important person in early Oroville history. So it was important to them. And I was talking about the Chan family. The reason, they were the ones that rescued so many artifacts when the floods came and took care of those items until the city took over. That we have a family tree. And this just goes to here, but I haven't found it. Where's Phil? She's in here somewhere. I know she is. Anyway, I went to school with Phil. Gives you an idea of her age. Here she is. And these are her children, and now I have great-grandchildren, so there's still more to this story.
Interesting. I didn't know the Chinese track genealogy.
Oh yeah, all the way back to an emperor, and I don't remember which emperor it is. Let's see. Family tree of Qin Sui Sing Bok. So they're all descendants from him, who was, anyway, so a very long history in that genealogy.
That is fascinating.
So, and this is the latest building in the complex. And it was dedicated a few years ago, I think maybe 10 years ago now. Is it that long ago? Somewhere around there. It's been here
Well, they'll have to come and read all the placards.
Yeah, and see how long it was dedicated. So, and if we have a minute, we can look at this little building here. So this is a typical building where the Chinese, when they were doing the gold rush and they were doing the gold digging, they did a building like this. And they basically would have shared, several people would have stayed here, and, some would have gone. They'd share. They'd stay. A couple would stay here and sleep while the others were working, and then they'd switch or something like that. But it was a very typical. Can you come in and you can see how small it is? And it's something we don't dust very often. So that was a pretty typical for what the local Chinese would have been doing during that period of the gold rush.
Wow.
So we have several other rooms that's for you to look at, but I think we've probably done our time.
We are. We're about out of time for our virtual tour. Yeah, so there's some amazing rooms to see upstairs as well. And
there's the Moon Temple.
Moon Temple.
And then there's the council chambers. And then we also have the Chan family is a temple worship area.
Uh-huh.
So there's three more places to look at that have a lot more amazing artifacts.
So that is fascinating. Well, Michelle, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and do this virtual tour for us. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I hope that we've whet your appetite to come back and have a greater experience in person, live, and then also, again, just one more shout out for our docent program. So important that we get participants to come in and, really just continue the legacy that has, been so established here in Oroville. We have an amazing community, 5 museums. It takes a lot of work to make it happen. And so we appreciate you and all the leadership and all the other docents that care so much about Oroville and its heritage. Well, thank you, and we'll see you at the next tour.